Hi there! Here's another book recommendations video to fill the gap until the final part of the current miniseries I'm working on is complete. I'm continuing my theme of generally anti-colonial writing, as that is currently my favorite topic, but I'll probably change it up in the future. Of course, I'll timestamp this, so if you want to jump to a particular book, then just take a look at the pinned comment. If you'd like more book recommendations, I've made a few more on my channel that I've put into a playlist for ease of access. So, let's get started. The Motorcycle Diaries by Che Guevara. Why yes, another book by Guevara. This particular book, although not specifically political, kinda is still very political. You can see the seeds of Guevara's mental shift from that of a well-meaning but idealistic petty bourgeois student to the great revolutionary that he would become. If you're unfamiliar, the diary is one written by Guevara when he took a trip around Latin America with his friend Alberto Granado. The motorcycle they traveled with, La Poderosa, was a creaky and unreliable thing that frequently broke down. This resulted in the pair having to seek work, food, and shelter wherever they could, and in the process directly interact with the undifferentiated mass of humanity within Latin America. The discussions within the diary, as Guevara says, range from the highest philosophical discourse to the pettiest complaints, depending on the state of one's stomach. Through Guevara's eyes, you see endemic poverty, oppression, and disenfranchisement in every country they encounter. This leads Guevara to the decision that the only solution for the region's sickening inequalities was armed revolution. This also shaped his view that Latin America was not a series of countries, but instead a single unit, unjustly divided and exploited. Imperialism was the enemy, and the United States the prime purveyor. The reason I especially like this book is because I have a very similar view of my own nation, the Arab nation, as it too is nothing but a single unit divided by colonialists and oppressed by imperialists and their puppets. If anything, read it as an inspiration. If not that, then at least for fun, as Guevara is a witty, personal, and fun writer. Also, there is a movie with the same name based on the book that's also pretty decent, so you can watch that after you've read the book, or just watch the movie, do whatever you like. Lenin. I've recently been on a rereading Lenin period, and honestly I'm always reminded in why I became a Marxist when I do. He is such an incredible and versatile writer that he both manages to explain complex things simply, while at the same time being very, very fun. In my opinion, only Mao proves to be a better writer out of the usual Marxist lineup. Now, what Lenin should you read? Well, preferably all of it. This is just a reminder for those that have yet to read Lenin to do exactly that. Apparently there is a lack of theory reading in new left spaces, and I hope my simple recommendation might get someone who's been putting it off to maybe start now. I decided to include this particularly as I recently read Lenin the Day After the Revolution by Slavoj Žižek. I don't particularly recommend it, as Žižek contributes practically nothing in his 74-page introduction. Honestly, it's just more of the usual nonsense you have to say in order to get published, and all the rest of the book is Lenin's later writings that can easily be found for free on the Marxist Internet Archive. I said this in my last video and I'll say it again, shame on Verso. So, read The State and the Revolution, Imperialism, the High Stage of Capitalism, What is to be Done, Left-Wing Communism and Infantile Disorder, and so much more. All his works are amazing. Immerse yourself in one of the giants of Marxism. I promise you that you'll come out with an important lesson or two learned, at the very least. Late Victorian Holocausts by Mike Davis. An absolutely fantastic read. Davis has a captivating and very pleasant way of maintaining your attention through this incredibly well-researched book. The prime goal of it being to show how the forceful incorporation of the what would become Third World into capitalism resulted in untold human misery and poverty. He clearly and intelligently presents how colonialism and capitalism increased poverty, particularly in rural areas, and caused famines all across the world, with effects that have yet to be recovered from. He shows how British colonial holdings were used to further their imperialism elsewhere at the expense of said colonies. For example, the continued exportation of grain and other foodstuffs out of India to Britain, while India was experiencing a series of the worst famines in its history. This is the perfect book, especially for those that dare point fingers at the famine in the USSR, which was also the last one in an area plagued by famines every few years, mind you. As the heritage they're attempting to defend has carried out far worse, untold, and unknown oppression for far longer. I'm including this book in this particular recommendation video because I think it should be read together with another book that I'll mention in a little bit. 10 Myths About Israel by Ilan Pape. A fantastic piece of work, especially for those not too knowledgeable about the situation in Palestine, both now and historically. Pape, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, does an excellent job dissecting myths such as Palestine was empty land, hint it wasn't, the Palestinians just voluntarily left, which they didn't. In fact, many books have been written covering the ethnic cleansing that the illegal military occupation of Palestine carries out, and that the Israeli government continues its attempts to destroy evidence of to this day. Zionism is Judaism, and another lie that is expertly handled in the book. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, a particularly hilarious myth as half the population isn't allowed to vote because they're not recognized as citizens. And in my opinion, the most important point for particularly Western readers, the myth that is the two-state solution. To further encourage you to pick it up, it's a quick read, just 148 pages, so you could knock it out in an evening or a train journey. Pape also is the author of several other great books, like The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, which I also encourage you to check out. How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. A monumental piece of work of the 20th century, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa is excellent in how it shows the effects of capitalism and European colonialism on African nations. In it, he shows the state of Africa and its development prior to European colonialism, how capitalism's rampant proliferation hampered indigenous development in favor of Europe's, and how, in a great final chapter, the supposed benefits of colonialism are all based on dishonest foundations. My favorite part is how consistently the author refers to African countries as underdeveloped as opposed to developing, since, as the book shows, these nations have been fundamentally underdeveloped, I'd say even de-developed, through the balance unfairly tipped towards Europe as a means to develop itself at Africa's expense. This is the book that I'd recommend you read alongside Mike Davis's. Honestly, I believe this should be required reading for high school students everywhere, as its study dismantles many racist myths about Africa that permeate Western spaces, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Reform or Revolution by Rosa Luxemburg. Alright, this is a quick recommendation for American comrades, mostly as I've mentioned this book in the past. It's a surprisingly relevant book that deals with, well, the title, Reform or Revolution. In the current climate where a lot of American leftists are really seduced by light European-style reformism, Luxemburg can provide a powerful answer as to why reform is only a temporary measure and that revolution, the conquest of state power by the working class, is the only way for concrete and sustainable change. Again, that's not to say that reforms are bad, but that reform can only change bits of an inherently broken system, and the point is to change it. It's a great read from an underrated, or more accurately, too little read, Marxist. And that's it for this time. Once I get some time to read some more relevant works to the message of this channel, I'll make another one of these. I'd like to know what you guys think of the channel so far, what you'd like to see more of, feedback, etc, etc. I don't usually ask for this at the end of my normal videos because, they're usually content heavy and it's a lot to expect people to give me feedback after all the verbal diarrhea, but but I'd still appreciate it nonetheless. So if you have any suggestions for me or what have you, just let me know.